Our next guest is a former TD who acted as Housing Minister from 2017 to 2020.
His new memoir details the ups and downs in office, and here to lift the lid on political life, it's Eoghan Murphy. Good morning to you, Eoghan. Great to have you with us. I love the title of it, instead of running from office.
Yeah.
Why did you write the book?
Well, thanks, and thanks for having me on. Well, I mean, running from office, I ran away from politics, and when I'd left politics, after being in the Dáil for about 10 years, I started to reflect on what had happened, how I had gone from being young and idealistic and hoping to kind of make big changes to finding myself quite desperately wanting to get out of the job. And as I thought through it and what went wrong, I thought there might be some help or use in writing about it, maybe an insight into politics or an insight even into our politicians and who they are.
And it's very interesting. Someone who would have shadowed you as a housing minister was Eoin O'Brien, and he has lauded this book, going, it's so honest, and you have been incredibly honest in this, acknowledging failures and everything that went on. But getting into politics, it wasn't the family business. You decided to, why did you decide to get into politics? You weren't living in Ireland, and you kind of came back with very lofty ambitions.
Yeah, and I suppose, am I to comment on that? I don't know.
No.
I'm not going to put my foot into something, but no, I mean, the reason I'm honest is because one of the things I didn't like about myself as a politician is that you can't be very honest. You've got to present a certain face to the public all the time. You know, you might have disagreements internally, but you've got to go out and pretend like everything is smooth on the surface and everything else. And so I enjoyed the chance to kind of take the mask off and kind of say, well, look, this is really what it's like and what it's about. And when I talk about why I got involved, I mean, part of it was because I was disappointed in how the country was going. I was living abroad and the financial crash had happened.
Yeah.
But part of it was also ambition for myself. You know, it was about, I think I can go back and make a difference, and I think that can do good for the people I'll be representing, but also do good for me as well in terms of career and that kind of stuff.
But it was very interesting because when you became a councillor, when you became a councillor, you're, again, the memoir jumps all over the place. You know, it's not a chronological order. But you talk about, you know, I hate people. Why am I dealing with your dog poo issues? Like, what's going on? Like, you were in the book going, I hate this.
Well, I knew nothing about it. And so the very basic act in politics is to go and knock on doors and ask people for a vote. I'd never done it before until I was doing it for myself. And you go canvassing, you knock on a door, someone answers it, and they go, yes, hello. And immediately you're in it, and you're not quite sure what to say. You're not quite sure what they might want from you. And it's a very steep learning curve. And it's a constant interaction with people. And certainly in the early days, I was kind of concerned about, well, what am I getting into here? Because I was thinking about pushing policy ideas and making big changes, but here I am, yes, people going, listen, you got to get rid of the dog poo or I'm not going to vote for you. So you're like, well, how does that exactly work? I mean, am I meant to be going around myself, or should I be running a campaign about this? Or, you know, and so you have moments and evenings where you get home a little bit exhausted, a little bit disillusioned, you know.
Because you go in with the right intentions, which we believe everybody goes into politics. Is there a learning? Is there anyone who pulls you aside and tells you this is how we do things? Like your first day going into the Dáil, what's it like?
No, yeah, and I compare it to being like school. When you go in with your class, you know, your kind of year, and you know, no one really tells you what to do, and you're not really meant to ask any of the older people.
Right.
The Dáil and the council has its own kind of norms and its own culture. And it takes a lot of time just to figure that out. And you make mistakes along the way. You make lots of mistakes trying to understand, well, what does it mean to be a TD? Like, I was very lucky, though, because I was in a party. I was in Fine Gael. So I had colleagues who could give me advice, and I could trust that advice to a degree. But I think if you're an independent or someone in a new party going in where your colleagues don't even really know what's going on, I think it'd be much more difficult. You know.
Your ascent was rapid, because when you're talking about, you know, being a councillor 2009, next thing you're a TD by 2011, and you became called the Five-A-Side Club. There was a group of you backbenchers who were seen as being very influential in doing what you wanted within Fine Gael, because it was a random. You met Enda Kenny in a pub, and he gave you his number. He said, we'll talk about politics. This is before you went into it.
Yeah.
And next thing, you were seen as kind of the architect of his downfall, because you were behind. It was how it was viewed.
No. I mean,
you did that.
I think we thought we were more influential than we actually were. But yeah, we were a bunch of first-time TDs who, after about a year of being in there and realising how it did work, thought it wasn't working very well, and we were very frustrated. So we started pushing for reform of the Dáil, reform of politics, changes to what our government was doing. And through all of that, it made us kind of outsiders within the system and made us kind of rebels. And it put me on a path. I didn't necessarily want to be against Enda Kenny. I thought he was a very good Taoiseach. But we were very impatient and we wanted more, so we were kind of pushing for that a lot.
So you sidled up beside Leo Varadkar, the pair of you pushed to push Enda out, and Leo obviously went in. It's quite interesting though that when Leo did get into office, it looked like he wasn't going to take you with him.
Yeah.
That must have been a bit of a kick in the teeth for you. How did you get yourself back into his good books and become the housing minister for housing?
Yeah, so I've been very fortunate. Enda Kenny promoted me to a junior minister after the 2016 election, and so now I was in government as a junior minister, but in government, and I loved that role and what I could do with it. And as Leo was looking to then replace Enda and become the Taoiseach, I helped him with that, and I thought then that would mean I would go with him into cabinet. And for a moment there, it looked like I wasn't, and I found that very difficult because I felt that I'd earned it. You know? And maybe I had, maybe I hadn't. And maybe he was right not to consider me, but he definitely wasn't considering me for a full cabinet portfolio.
So what did you do?
Well, I went to speak to him about it. I eventually kind of plucked up the courage to go and talk to your boss, essentially, you know, but also the most powerful person in the country. So there's only so much you can say, you know, because if you find yourself...
a big part in getting him there as well.
Yeah, but I mean, he had lots of considerations. You know, when you're making those decisions, you want the best people at the table. And so he had to weigh up, you know, people who had experience. He had to weigh up things like geography, different things, talent. And I was making the push, you know, from a point of loyalty, I suppose. Listen, we've been in this together this far. I should come with you.
You note how much you changed in a very short period of time. That you were previous, it was like, oh, this is great. You know, I'm chatting to people, I'm involved. But when you didn't get that, you were like, I was destined for more. How could he be ignoring me like this? You say that. I had convinced myself, and others told me. I'd read it in the newspapers. So what happens to you when you get that? We all know that power corrupts, whether it corrupts absolutely or not. What does that closeness to power, what did it do to your brain?
Well, it changed my ambition.
Okay.
So my ambition in my first term was, you know, very idealistic, speak truth to power. I don't mind being offside here. I don't mind if it doesn't mean I'll never be promoted, because I believe what I'm saying is right and I believe these are important things. But once I got into government as a junior minister and I saw how much you can do, actually, you know, the levers you can pull, the things you can get done, you're involved in very important discussions every day of the week. I wanted more of that. And so my ambition kind of changed from, you know, maybe speaking truth to power to being, let's stay in the inner circle. You've gotten into the inner circle. You're sitting in a room with 3 or 4 people as Leo Varadkar's talking to Theresa May, the British Prime Minister. This is the very centre of power in the country. Don't leave this room. So do what you have to do to stay there.
But then you get the portfolio of housing.
Yeah.
And under your stewardship, we saw ever increasing, and unfortunately since then the numbers go up. Every single month it hit 10,000 people under your stewardship. Of course, we all know what's happened. There's not enough houses in the country. It was an emergency. What was it like there? Because you were public enemy number one for an awful lot of time.
Yeah, like it's obviously housing, and it's still an issue, but it was a constant daily issue. A lot of it bad news, a lot of the time. And we were working very hard, a team of people who were very dedicated civil servants in the Custom House with me, trying to fix things, trying to implement solutions, but none of it was happening quickly enough. I mean, I was also involved in dealing with our storm preparation and responses. And that was, when you did that stuff, it happened very quickly. You said, look, we're going to do this, it was done. And I would get frustrated because with housing, I'd say, let's do this. And then 12 months later, it still hadn't happened. So I find that very frustrating, but also, and I kind of had a sense of it at the time, but it was only until I went to properly examine what had gone wrong, I saw the mistakes that I had made in not making the issue more of a priority for the government. The government said it was a priority, it was, but we didn't really, and that was my fault, elevate it up to being as important as something like Brexit.
You talk about it here as well, that the whole generation of people will know me as the Minister for No Housing. Then you talk about when you step away, you gave a final bit of spin, deflected from the darker moments and tried to give a parting message. This is the good thing about this book, though. You're not parting for the darker moments. You've opened up about the mental health and actually the pressure on politics and how difficult. Like, whenever you're seen as this as the Minister for Housing, there's 10,000 people homeless. Like, can you sleep at night? How difficult is it?
Yeah, well, and I was upset with myself for not being honest when I was leaving politics as to why I was. So I was glad the book gave me an opportunity to kind of talk about that stuff, because I didn't handle the public pressure or the public criticism well. I let it bite too hard and I let it build up on top of me. So no, I didn't sleep at night often. I tried things like sleeping pills and a whole load of other things, and they just didn't work for me. So it all kind of built up, and you start to feel very embarrassed about that as well, and a little bit ashamed, because people are going through real problems. I'm not dismissing the importance of mental health at all, but the people that your policies are impacting are having real struggles. And then you're sitting in your office, maybe feeling sorry for yourself.
Yeah.
And then you start to kind of have a bit of self-loathing, and then it just builds up on top, and you end up in a negative kind of downward spiral. And then it kind of just, it broke me a bit, you know. And so I came to a point, and running from office is kind of a nod to this as well, where I physically had a crisis of confidence, a panic attack, a breakdown, and I physically tried to run away from the job while I was in London one night. And then once I recovered from that the next day, I was like, oh, Jesus, I need to get out of this job because, you know, whatever about whether I'm doing well in it or not, and most people didn't think I wasn't managing it well. And so from that point then, I was in this kind of constant battle, and it was daily about trying to keep a face to the public, try to get the work done, but not have myself kind of breaking underneath the weight of it, or the weight I felt I was carrying from it.
I think it's searingly honest. Like when you go into 2018, a breakdown, you're going to a counsellor, you talk about, you know, trying to use alcohol to dull the pain. You went through a real traumatic personal experience with an ex-partner as well. All of this is going on. What is your advice to anyone? Advice to anyone who's considering going into politics? Because you talk about that a lot. If not me, then who?
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
If there's a sense of civic duty.
Yeah.
What do you think of it, and what do you make of the public discourse nowadays when it comes to politicians?
Yeah, I'm not sure if, you know, the public discourse in terms of, you know, who our politicians are has changed much over the last number of years, or since I got involved. Like, from the moment I was involved, we were feeling pressure, particularly around things like social media, which was new to politics, and how to handle that pressure. But we never discussed it amongst ourselves as politicians, or even that openly, because as a politician, you can't show weakness. You're meant to show confidence all the time. I know what I'm doing. I'm doing the right thing. Because if the public lose faith in you in that regard, then you're useless, and you should be gone. But for people who want to go in, I mean, I read a book when I was younger, because I wanted to be a diplomat. Eamon Delaney wrote a book called An Accidental Diplomat, and it was all about the life of a diplomat. Now, 80% of the book is really boring stuff that he had to do, but 20% was very exciting. And the 80% didn't put me off at all. So what I say to people is, listen, you know, understand what this job involves and what it's like. And if the negative stuff doesn't put you off, then great, go for it. Because the stuff you can do is fantastic. I mean, the opportunities are brilliant. The privilege of being able to stand up in your national parliament and speak is fantastic. And all those new people who've been elected in this recent election, you know, they'll never forget that. I mean, I think you'll never forget campaigning, because even though I talk about the ups and downs of a campaign, actually putting yourself forward and putting yourself in the mix, you'll never regret that, because you'll always say, well, look, you know what, I tried. And if you are successful and you get in there, it's amazing what you can get done and how important you can be. But you need to also understand that you're public property and you live in the public eye every day, and it doesn't just stop when you leave the office.
Yeah, and Owen will pick up your dog poo. That's what how's life now?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, good. I live over in London.
You had to get out, did you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was, you know, very well known when I was in politics, and Ireland, Dublin's a small place, and I wanted to try and get some privacy back and a bit of anonymity. Yeah. So I went to London, and you know, I've been there for 3 years. Yeah.
Very good. Good on you. Listen, it's a really fascinating book. It's great to actually just lift the lid and look behind the scenes. Running from Office, Confessions of Ambition and Failure in Politics. Eoghan Murphy, great to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us, Owen. Cheers.